Hello, this is Chris. I've just pulled over by the side of the road because I thought about something else I wanted to talk about in this second part of my new series, how to write a book for a complete beginner. I just finished work about my day job, that is my teaching job in Japanese primary schools. I just finished that about 15 minutes ago. It's a Friday, so I just kind of pulled up halfway home. You can see out there, it's pretty wild looking. If you look right across the valley there, you probably can't see, but that's in the trees there is the school that I work at on a Monday in another little village, because I go to a different one every day. And they're very small. Today's school's got 31 students, very small school. But anyway, I digress. Last time we talked about if you're literally just starting out, finding time to write, not overthinking it too much, just trying to get into a routine, looking at getting into flow state, which is when you're not really thinking about it, you're just writing, and not over editing, just literally continuing until you get to the end, if that's possible. Today I just wanted to talk a little bit about characters. So this is something that's very important. You can you can plot out your character beforehand, or you can just literally pick a name, pick your gender or whatever, and your rough age group, and just get going, and just like your character will slowly develop as you go. You see a lot of books these days where you'll pick it up and it'll be some sort of like one-armed tree surgeon, war veteran, who was an orphan, and they just have these incredibly complicated sort of backstories and all that, but like I give you a good example. Stephen King, look at his characters, the teachers, bank managers, doctors, just shop workers. They're normal people. You don't have to create this like completely unrealistic, you do get I'm sure you get one-armed tree surgeons that are orphans and war veterans, and and are allergic to tarmac, or I don't know, whatever, but you're just as well off having like a teacher. A lot of my characters are teachers, because they're relatable. People know what a teacher does, they know what a bank manager does, they know what like a cafe assistant does, so it's easy for the reader to imagine themselves into that situation, to, in a sense, put themselves into the viewpoint of that character. So I would advise you, when you're first starting out, to basically pick a just checking the thing's recording, just pick a fairly simple character, something that people will be able to relate to. And also, in terms of you planning and writing the book, it's a lot easier to write about a teacher than it is to say write about a secret agent, war veteran, because there's a lot more research involved. A lot of people, you can kind of guess what a teacher does, even if you've never been a teacher. It's a lot easier to write about someone that's kind of normal. So obviously you can get more complicated as you go on, but I would advise, you don't want to be constantly checking, oh, do they do this, how would they do this. Keep it simple is the first thing you should think about. And also, something important with your protagonist, which is your main good guy, is try to make them likable. Is very important. They don't have to be like really great guys, but they do need to be likable to a certain extent. If you have a main character that's basically a complete asshole, it can be very difficult for the reader to connect with them. I can give you an example. I've got this book that I wrote very early on in my before I'd published anything, right back when I was 21, 22. It's called The Man Who Built the World. It's a great book. You should read it. I really recommend it. It's kind of a horror, but the main character, his name's Matthew Cassidy, and the cliche, he's the struggling writer, but he's also an alcoholic, and he's a bit punchy. He's smacked his wife a few times. And when I started out with this book, my aim was to see if I could get this really detestable guy and redeem him in some way by the end of the book, because he had reasons why this was all going on. Like, he wasn't normal in a supernatural sense. He had some kind of, like, without going into spoilers, I mean, it doesn't really matter, no one buys that book, but it was almost a kind of a demonic possession inherited from his family, and you find out about that as you go on. And by the end of the book, he's managed to get rid of that. But the problem was, I had several people that read it would write reviews like, I just hate the main character. He was just too much of an asshole for them to get over that. The people that did get over it, read the book, said it was a great book, and I think it was a good book. But a lot of people just could not get past that, the fact that he was basically a real dick. And I've got another series, while we're on the same subject, another series called Tales of Crow, which doesn't sell anything either. Very little, very, very little. And the main character in that is basically the bad guy, and he's a very, very unpleasant person. Like, he's, and I was, as a writer, it was fun, both that series and also the Man Who Built the World. They're really fun to write. I really enjoyed writing those books. I liked them. I liked the characters. I liked what I did with the characters. I thought it was a good character study, but in commercial terms, they just were absolute stinkers. They completely flopped. And the reason they completely flopped is because these characters were just not very nice people. And it's all right. I'll talk about bad guys in a minute, but the good guy, he has to be kind of relatable. He has to have some redeeming features, and there's ways you can do that. And another thing that's kind of connected with that, your main character should not be perfect. He or she should be flawed in some way, because the whole point of the book is that they have to face adversity and they have to overcome that adversity in order to grow as a person and to become the person that they are at the end of the book. That's the sort of aim of the story. It's not just about getting from literal A to B. It's about them changing from A at the beginning of the book to B at the end of the book, which should be a positive change. It's very important that it's a positive change. But if they're already that perfect person at the beginning of the book, it's going to be very, very hard to improve on that. And most people are flawed. Most people are not perfect people. They have kind of like, a sort of a darker side, or like a weaker side, or the point that we are human and we aren't perfect in any way. Otherwise we'd all be like super happy and like super successful. Most of us aren't, myself included. We aren't perfect people. And so if you present the reader with a person who's not perfect, then they will be able to relate to that person. And then and by relate to them, I mean, when you read it, you kind of feel as though you're rooting for that person. You can, in some senses, you see that person as you, and you're like, you want them to succeed, and that will help you, help the reader to stay in the book. And that's what you want the reader to do. You don't want them like, that guy, he's just too good looking, or he's like too cool, he's like just wins every sword fight. Good example, I mean, everyone says it, but it's Star Wars. Luke Skywalker at the beginning, he's all gung-ho, but he's weak, he's flawed. He gets his ass handed to him, repeatedly. He makes a ton of mistakes, but by the end of the series, he's achieved, he's reached that kind of B level. Like, he's reached his higher, he's grown as a person, as well as, completed his quest, so to speak. The hero's quest that you hear about. And that is that's a perfect example. Whereas you look at the later films, the rubbish ones, where the hero is already perfect at the start of the film. I mean, they try and pretend that they're not, but when they come to a fight or something, or they, oh wow, they can fly this complicated machine straight away without any training. They can win this battle without any skill. They have not had to learn the skill to do it. They're already good, and that is just not relatable, because people aren't like that in real life. People are weak. When they start out, people aren't able to beat the enemy when they start out. And that's the kind of character you want. You want a character that has struggled, a character that is, you want a character that's positive, is trying to fight back, but does not have the skills to do it, if that makes any sense. Just basically, just make them make mistakes. All they have to do is make mistakes and not be perfect, at what you want them to achieve. That's what I talked about, I think, in the first episode, where you put barriers in the way and they've got to get over the barriers one at a time, and it takes a while to get over each one, and each one after that is higher and more difficult to get over, until it's really difficult. And then basically you meet the boss at the end, and ideally they would have achieved the skills to beat the boss at the end. And not, when I say boss, it could literally be the bad guy, but it could also mean they've solved the puzzle they've got to solve, or they've come to terms with their inner turmoil in order to free themselves to have the relationship with the really nice partner that they've met through the course of the book. It's not necessarily literally getting to the end of the obstacle course and then climbing over the vertical wall. It's a but it's a metaphorical thing. And anyway, I don't want to go too long because I've got to get home. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the bad guy. Now this is completely different. You can there's all sorts of videos that will probably go into way more depth than I will, but my theory on bad guys is, especially if in certain genres like a fantasy or something, science fiction, you've got to have a named visible bad guy. Your bad guy has to be a figure that is you can hate. Darth Vader is a perfect example, like Freddy Krueger, just that kind of, like the Terminator or the Alien, whatever. It's you can see him, you know what he looks like, you know what he does, or she. I don't like to, generalized stereotype. Or they're a presence. They might, like, say in a mystery, you maybe don't know exactly who they are, what they look like, but there's a presence, and it's something that the reader can focus on. I'll give you an example of a bad example. Was that who was it, the director, that Mark Wahlberg movie, oh god, that was terrible, where the bad guy was the heir, and the heir, I think it was M. Night Shyamalan, and I love his movies. He's a great director. He's done some really good movies. I've got a feeling it was his one. I really should have checked this out before I made the video, but if you've seen it, you'll know. Mark Wahlberg was running around, and the trees are the bad guys, but there's no visible enemy. It's just the world is bad, and it's like the reader doesn't have anything they can focus on to hate or to fear. And so when you've got like a named bad guy or a bad entity, so it gives the reader like a focus, something to dislike. And something else about villains is it's okay for them to be flawed and have reasons for what they do. This is very common, especially in these long series where you get prequels and all that kind of stuff. And I have done it myself. My biggest villain, the Governor in the Tomb Raider series, another little plug there, he was once a boy stolen from his family, put into this kind of program which just warped him and turned him into this complete monster, you know, very kind of Frankenstein-y type of thing. And then of course he's filled with anger, and he can't, but it's too much, he can't get over it, he cannot overcome the anger that is inside him. He must basically win. But there is a reason for why he is what he is. But you don't necessarily have to make every villain redeemable. Like say Darth Vader, he becomes back to Anakin Skywalker at the end. But then say you've got Emperor Palpatine, forget the new movies. I've watched them all. I couldn't sit through them again. But the original, he's evil. He's just pure evil. And that is absolutely fine. You can hate him because he's just a scumbag. He doesn't need redeeming features because he is an object of absolute hate. And that's what you want. You know, he does not have to turn back into a good guy. You know, that happens, you know, and that generally seems to happen with the lower level bad guys tend to be redeemable. But, you know, it's okay for them to just be pure evil. That's fine, you know, but you don't want them to be too soft. You want them to have, you know, they're allowed to do horrible things because they're the bad guy. Another thing, going back to the protagonist, the good guy, is if you want people to, a little tip that I'm basically paraphrasing from some other blog or whatever, if you want them to be likable, have them save an animal early on in the book, the first 10 pages, rescue a cat or pat a dog on the head. That always works. That's a very good way of, or, you know, help a grandma across the street. My next book coming out, the guy helps a grandma across the street, literally in the first chapter. You know, it's a little bit of a tool, but it works. You know, I recommend you using stuff like that. You know, to, you know, it's just these are just part of your toolbox, things that you use, you know, to make them relatable and make them, you know, appeal to the reader. But the same thing, you can do the same thing with a bad guy. You can have them just be brutal right off the bat, do something really nasty, you know, and then you're going to have the reader feeling how you want them to feel about the bad guy, and that's very important. But anyway, I think I'll probably leave it there. I don't want to keep rambling on, trying to keep these videos to about 20 minutes, and yeah, looking at the clock, we're close on that. So basically, your protagonist, your good guy, make them relatable, don't make them too complicated. Simple jobs are fine. They have to have flaws, and if you want a little trick, is have them be super nice to an old person or an animal right off the bat, the first chapter or two. Your antagonist, your bad guy, is okay to be pure evil, should be some kind of entity on which the reader can focus. I don't know how that would work with like poltergeists and stuff, but just saying the demonic entity is probably enough. You know, you do need to have a named bad guy of some kind, and they can have flaws and they can be redeemable, but they don't have to be. They can just be pure evil. It's fine. Another thing, if they look distinctive, that's okay. Don't worry so much. Like I don't want to sort of get all political or anything, but it's okay for them to be a bit stereotypically evil. You know, just don't worry too much about it. You know, no matter what how you do your character, someone will hate them and say, oh, that's a stereotype, whatever. It doesn't, you know, don't worry about it too much. Just do it. Do whatever you want, you know, and have them be as evil as you want. Have them do something really nasty at the beginning, you know, to give the reader a reason to hate them and at the same time to root for your protagonist. So that's all I'm going to talk about. So that's your good guys and your bad guys, just some tips for you. So good luck with whatever you're writing, and I hope that you know, not many people have watched these videos, but let's hope that we get a bit of momentum going. And you know, if they look a bit tacky or whatever, then you know, eventually I'll just re-record them when I'm real pro with the whole speaking thing. So have a nice day, and thank you if you did watch this video. There probably won't be a button there because I'm not good at doing that kind of stuff, but if you like this video, subscribe and click the likes, and all that other stuff that everyone else says at the end of their videos. Good job and have a nice day, and I've got to go home now, so bye bye, see you next time.